The previous lesson, we looked at how easy it is to get external data. So we could use get to get information from external files, pull it back into our JavaScript, and utilize it within our code. So in this lesson, I want to look at some additional methods. So I did that output 1, and let's do an output 2. So that we have another value here, and this one we're going to use that object information again, but we're going to send it via post, and you're going to see it's very similar to what we just did with the get, where we're going to post the data over to PHP, and instead of get we're going to use post, and really that's pretty much the same thing from there. So we've got the URL of the path of the file we're trying to connect with, the data that we're sending over, and then we've got our callback function here. So whatever happens once we make our connection and the full round trip. And for this one, we're updating the output of ID output 2. So now let's take a look at how this is working out when we click it. So we're getting a return value of get. We're still getting that Lawrence from the previous one and that post there, so tester. When we click it, now we see that we've done both round trips on get and post, sending over that input field value and retrieving it back from our server. And this again opens up a lot of options when you're interacting with your web content, because it really does give you the ability to send over and retrieve back some really customized information. And if you want to query into the database and so on, you can do all of this and a whole lot more. So when it comes to Ajax requests, JQuery has one that actually encompasses all of these. So I'm going to just comment these ones out. And let's just focus on the Ajax method right now. So the Ajax method, this one is where we can get really specific. So if you have some specific parameters, you can really customize that asynchronous Ajax request here, where we can specify the URI or URL, string values, settings, and so on. So a lot of options here within Ajax. So if none of the other options really suit your needs, then you could always use Ajax. So here we need to specify a number of objects here that we want it to send over. So one is going to be the path. So maybe what we can do is we'll just link over to the path here. So we can send information over. So first, let's switch it over to php.php. So it's sending it over to the local file. We've got some data, so we've got a payload of data that we want it to send over. So that data is contained within this variable. So we can add that in, and we've got a number of options. So if we've returned back a successful connection, then we can fire off this function. It's picking up that data information, and we just console log out. Maybe we'll just console log out that data. And also, we have some more additional options. So if we throw an error, if we have a problem connecting, we don't have the right file name, it's going to throw an error. So this is something else that we can look out for within our JavaScript, just to make sure that whatever is happening there, that we're aware of our error and we know how to handle that error. So if there's something that goes wrong, we can pick that up as well. So let's output it as, we'll just write out error within the console. So if something goes wrong. So we have a number of options here when we're making our Ajax calls, and let's try that out now. So whenever we click it, so we see we get returned get. So everything seems to be working properly. Do test, return get test. So it's not actually outputting, we haven't set up that output yet, but typically for the success of it, we would set up that output here. So we would have an output of that returned information. So get, return get, and then there we've got that information. So again, full round trip that we're able to send with our data, and really gets interesting when we start connecting some other additional external files. So if I was to do something like this file here, And one other thing I did want to point out is notice that it is using get. And I did say that we can really customize this, so we do have an option to customize that and be more specific on what method it's using. So we don't have to necessarily stick with get using Ajax. We can also send it as a post as well. So let's open up our editor and specify the method. So not only can we set the URL, we can also set the method that we want to use. So our method that we want to use, so we can swap it from get to post. So default is get, and let's update that to post. Comma separate it because it is an object. So now we see that it's sending over the post request to the JavaScript. So a lot of flexibility with that, definitely. We can also simply do like a get and specify the method as get. And we don't necessarily need to send any object information, so we can just go over to the JSON data and return back some JSON data. And I believe that this probably isn't going to, should console log it out. And again, we're stuck with that returned object that now we could utilize within our JavaScript. So if we want to get that first name or the last name, we can output that there now. So we can do the same thing that we were doing earlier where we set up the first name. So that is the visible output. So we get our first name. And this is again coming from this JSON file online from my JSON bins. And we can really see the power and ease that we can utilize here using jQuery, because with JavaScript, of course, you can do the same thing with JavaScript, but it's not as flexible, it's not as easy to write and simple and straightforward. And this, when you look at the Ajax method, it's really just laid out there that it just makes sense that you have the ability to send the method, the URI, the data that you're sending over. You can change the method, you can change the URL, and then you've got options here what to do depending on success, error, and so on. So really nicely laid out, and this is why a lot of times when we're doing Ajax requests within JavaScript, we divert to using the jQuery methods because they're just so much easier and better laid out and easier to utilize. And we can see that there's so much power behind this. And this type of functionality, it can really work anywhere. So even if I wanted to update it here within this output here, so we've got our function. Whenever this gets clicked, we've got just loading that page, but I can change it over to the Ajax, and we can see that we can send and retrieve that data as well back into this web form and try it out there and utilize it there as well. So I think there's, just going to save that. And there's an issue there with the object, so I should update that input field as well, because I believe it's probably looking for that input field there because it's sending over that object information. And we need to make sure that we've got all of the same variables there so that we're ready to pass that information over. And so that was the problem there, that was looking for that object's data and it wasn't available. So now it is available, and now we can actually connect with that online file and retrieve back that information. And we see we've got it really nicely laid out. So if we did want to get the last name instead, we can do that as well and retrieve back the last name. So now it's going to return back last name. Well, wanted city, for instance, we'd specify city, and now when we click it, we return back the city of that object. And we could save that again, and now we can just return back that city. So sometimes you do need to use the console to really break down and check out all the different available items and the available content within that object itself.